thank you very much for joining us today. This is Ernesto Silva. I'm the provost at Universidad del Desarrollo. We are participating in this great event related to education that's called educrear. We are proud today to have the conversation that it's going to be, I'm sure, very interesting with Maria Spies. Maria, she's the co-founder and co-CEO of Holon IQ. Holon IQ was founded in 2018 with the vision of building the trusted global source of education market intelligence in order to connect the people, ideas, and capital that are driving and supporting innovation from preschool to lifelong learning. Maria, thank you very much for joining us today, and welcome to Universidad del Desarrollo and educrear, this event organized between Telefónica and Universidad del Desarrollo. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to be here.
The first thing that I wanted to ask you today is, why did you decide to start with Holon IQ? Why to create this company and this idea? What you had in mind when starting this project?
That's a fantastic question. You know, one of the things I've been working, like many people, in education for many, many years, and I see thousands of innovations happening all over the world, in individual classrooms, in universities, in schools. One of the problems with innovation in the education sector, as we saw it, was the huge fragmentation of that innovation. And we felt that if the sector, which is so important really to humanity, was going to move forward in any material way, we needed to connect up that fragmentation. Great innovation in a whole industry does not occur if everything is super fragmented globally. And so we thought, we need to connect these dots. We need to connect these innovations. We need to connect these people. And other industries have got amazing market intelligence. And it just seemed wrong that education did not have great market intelligence on that innovation space. And so that's what we set out to do.
When you started with this project, your main idea was working with schools, preschool, universities, or you had a broad idea of education and wanted to go through the entire system?
Yes, that's right. We wanted to, because across education, certain innovations, use of technology, use of technology, pedagogy can be applied in different parts of the sector. So our aim was to build a market intelligence platform that the sector, whether you were an education institution or an investor or an ed tech company, that you could get access to information that you otherwise wouldn't have able to access.
You know, Maria, that last year, when I came back to Chile after a year in the US, I don't remember exactly which months. I think it was during the Chilean summer, between January and March, that I found a report from Holon IQ talking about the education for 2030. And it was very different from the things that I was reading before. You were mentioning 5 different scenarios. I remember that you were mentioning one possible scenario as education as usual. Other one mentioned as regional rising. The third one, the idea of global giants. The fourth, education from peer to peer. And the last one, the idea of robot revolution. It was very, very interesting to me to find a report that was opening the different scenarios and showing that the education was going to change really fast over the next decade. How did you build that report, and what have you been following in the last year about that?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ernesto. One of the things that we were very interested in was the structure of education as the formal education sector, formal and informal, how people learn, in what systems of operation does the world learn. And we could see that there was a lot of talk about the future of education. And we used machine learning, we used advanced technology ourselves to analyze articles, academic papers, other written material that had been written, like 10,000 articles, with the subject of the future of education. And we wanted to understand what the world was saying about the future of education. Were there any patterns in that? And indeed there were. It was very interesting. And so we applied natural language processing to these thousands of articles to surface any patterns that we could find. And what we did find was very definite patterns. And so this is sort of a high-tech crowdsourcing, building patterns out of what people were talking about. And out of that spilled clear themes. And then we used our own, what we call top-down human sort of intelligence. So it's a part machine, part human, which is something about how the future might be.
Which percentage machine and which percentage human analysis?
Yeah, that's right. Well, you know, I think the marriage of the two is the important thing. And so we used our own knowledge of education industry to put these into categories, and they fell into these 5 scenarios. And then we went around the world, literally we went around the world twice, physically, to present these 5 scenarios and ask our audiences around the world, which scenario do they think was most likely and which scenario would they prefer? Very interesting responses, and different in different parts of the world, which just shows the beautiful landscape of different regions and how people like to learn differently. And so, but having said that, the scenario that had the most votes, if you like, all around the world was the peer-to-peer scenario. And this is where, in an environment where, you know, we lose confidence in big institutions and people convert to working with each other, essentially. You can see how these things are happening in terms of blockchain technologies, peer-to-peer marketplaces. It's happened in other industries. So peer-to-peer, people love the idea that actually learning is a human-to-human thing, a peer-to-peer thing. And so that was the most popular scenario. And there were others that were popular as well, but nothing like the peer-to-peer scenario.
I have 2 questions, Maria. One is related to the peer-to-peer scenario. Is how do you think higher education institutions should take that into account for their own work for the future? We will go later to the digital capability framework, but how institutions should take that into account in order to personalize the process of education for students. And the second one is that it's related to the idea that you launched that report a year before COVID-19 pandemic emerged. So how things are changing after that in your views?
Well, I mean, one of as to the first question, we in terms of COVID first, in terms of COVID, you know, the world has definitely changed the way in which it, you know, undertakes learning, sort of. Really, the structure of industry hasn't really changed. It's just the mode of delivery that's changed. And I think over time, we're going to see a deeper change to the way that, that those people who provide education and those people who are learning, the way that those two bodies get together in terms of to help have the learning occur. So at the moment, I see a surface level change through COVID, a surface level change to the way in which learning is occurring. But that's just the beginning of deeper sort of changes. In terms of how education institutions, higher education institutions can take on the sort of idea of peer-to-peer and embed that into their own delivery. It's a big challenge because peer-to-peer can mean many different things on different levels. So peer-to-peer might mean the collapse of institutions completely at its most extreme end. Of course, we really don't.
Yeah, that's really extreme, right?
That's very extreme. I don't think this is going to happen. But what we might see is a building more and more into the educational or the learning processes, the opportunity for students to learn from each other, as well as learn from the professor or learn from the institution. And you can build these peer-to-peer mentoring or activities, assessment, all sorts of peer type activities deeply embedded into even a formal program delivered by an institution. And this is not new, of course, and it's harder and harder to scale. And that's the challenge. And so I think in some ways technologies can help us to scale things which were in the past not really scalable. And so that's part of the figuring out of that challenge, I think.
Thank you very much for sharing these views with us. And related to your last point, how technology can help also in order to scale different capabilities and challenges, you have been working in a higher education digital capability framework. And that's really important because you have been working across the entire learner's life cycle. Can you share with us the main idea of this framework, its contents, and then we can discuss a little bit about that and what you are finding in different institutions about where they feel strong and where they feel weak and where are the opportunities for the future?
Yes. Let me share my screen for one minute. I've got an overview of the framework, and then it'll be easier to present. Of course, is institutions grappling with having conversations, even having a language, a common language to talk about how they might digitize their student experience in order to be able to deliver both online and blended and different experiences given the fast move to online learning. And we broke down, and we have a higher education panel globally, and we asked our panel members to help us to identify and map across the student life cycle all the elements that an institution might need to consider in terms of digitization, so that together they could deliver a full digital experience.
Maria, just to one short interruption, just to mention that, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that your panel includes more 1,000 senior leaders from higher education institutions around the world.
Who are part of the panel. So essentially, the framework follows the learner life cycle. How else could you? we decided to go from the learner life cycle. It's the best way. And it's essentially cut into 4 different sections. Demand and discovery, which is the process of not only designing your strategy on programs, but also designing for students and building finding those students, recruiting them and onboarding them. That's the first sort of pinky purple area. The second is learning design. This is designing curriculum, finding or building content, the subject matter expertise to do that, teaching strategies. So that's that whole designing of programs. And how do you embed digital into that process? The third green area, the learner experience, which is where actually the rubber hits the road, so to speak. And that is bringing it together so that students can have a digital experience, not just in the classroom, but university higher education is more than just what happens in the classroom, but all parts of the learner experience, including wellbeing and mental health, student community and clubs, all that sort of thing. And then the final area is the work and lifelong learning becoming more and more important. And so those services, which are often not quite digitized, how do we build digital solutions into that part? So the capability framework covers all of those 4 areas, and then you can see the capability blocks, the 70 plus capability blocks down the bottom.
You went through a process of asking your panel different questions, right? And you asked them about which are the gaps that they find between their capabilities and what's happening in reality. You also went through performance, in which areas they are performing better than others. You also analyzed the idea of the priorities that they have. I would like to ask you if you can share with us some of the findings that you get through this process of working with the panel related to the digital capability framework.
Yes, super happy to share. I've just got a summary here on the second slide. It's busy, but basically we did ask, where are your gaps in digital capability? Where do you do well, your performance and your priorities? And so institutions from all around the world responded to this. And interesting, but perhaps not surprising, the gaps are in process and people rather than in technology itself. And this is, you know, we see these findings over and over again, that digital transformation in any industry is not really about the technology, but it's about how the people and their capabilities and the processes inside an organization or an institution that come together that build digital. Because it's not owned by sometimes one group. It's not the IT department, but actually it belongs to everyone, and that makes it hard in terms of change management within an organization, mapping across every part of the, you know, customer, or in this case, student life cycle. So we saw those gaps there.
And related to that, I guess you found that institutions that perform better in these areas or have less gaps are the ones where the leaders are involved in this digital process, not only where IT areas or technology areas are the ones in charge. Do you have some experiences to share with us in other related to that?
Yeah, I mean, leadership in any transformation in any organization is one of the key determinants of success, of course. And what we found is those individuals or groups in leadership positions who can work across all the myriad of different elements that need to move forward in terms of digital, and they're part of that process, really where we see the greatest success, where their eyes are firmly on the end point as it relates to learners. And so the solution, what leadership who bring their people, their processes and the technology along, often are talking about how their learners, the expectations of learners, the needs of their learners, their future learners, and they're future oriented. And so that sort of leadership where you can bring that along and keep focusing on the needs of learners are the ones who often can move the fastest and bring everybody with them.
Maria, related to performance, it's interesting to find that learner experience is the number 4. The worst result. And you mentioned a couple of minutes ago that learner experience includes some experience in classroom, but also the experience in the life in the university or the institution. Can you elaborate a little bit on that and how those different areas weight on the ideas of evaluating learner experience?
Yeah, that's a great point. So digital performance has focused a lot in universities on the demand and discovery, you know, the sort of social media and getting students in and so on, because they're out in the market and it's often marketing people. The learner experience was ranked by these institutions as their least high performance in digital. And one of the reasons I think here is because the learner experience is where everything comes to a point. That is you know, if you were in a commercial situation, this is your product and the experience of your customers, and everything needs to come together for the learner to have a good digital experience. That is IT systems, data integration, you know, how they experience the process online or digitally, and, you know, the skills of the staff in order to bring all that together. So it's the end point. It's where it all comes together the most difficult. And in a way, to digitize all parts of a learner's experience requires every single unit or department within the institution to be in sync. That's very, very difficult in a complex organization like university. And so they rate their learner experiences lowest currently on digital, but you can see in the next one, their priorities are learning design and learner experience. And that is actually just core business for universities. So universities are focusing on their core. And I love to see universities at the highest level focusing on learning design and learner experience, because this is teaching and learning. This is what universities are. And so the whole institution coming together to focus on those things, I think, is wonderful. Well, it is a big challenge. And what we do see around the world is new roles starting to pop up in universities. director or pro-vice chancellor or VP of digital transformation, for example, is a new role that we're seeing. We're starting to talk with people in these roles. And sometimes, more often than not, that in our experience, these people are coming from different industries. They're not necessarily professors who have worked through the ranks and in different departments, and now they're in a digital transformation role. But in fact, they are people from different industries with a technology background or a transformation background, and so that's interesting too. New types of talent is coming into higher education.
I think you're totally right. That's what we have been doing over the last 4 years at Universidad del Desarrollo. We launched a strategic initiative called Digital Transformation, and it was not an IT project. It was a project for the entire university in order to change the experience of the students and the faculty going through the systems, the process, and different areas. And I think so far we have been successful because we did it that way and introducing the ideas that you mentioned before, bringing people from different areas and industries and trying to have a perspective of the entire university. I wanted to ask you about lifelong learning. In terms of priorities, it looks at the bottom of the table. But I think it's one of the most challenging issues for the future. We have a community and a workforce that it's going to be demanding a lot of new knowledge, capabilities, technologies, and information. How do you think is that area or that environment going to change, and how relevant is going to be related to the digital transformation and the process?
Yeah, it's really really interesting, and I think what I try to do is zoom right to 60,000 feet or something, and have a look down at the time that we're in right now. And I think right now institutions are now they've gone from emergency online teaching to now planning their digital learner experience. And they have to design their courses for that as well. So learning design and learner experience. But still, I think this is a point in time. And so they can't do everything all at once. So they're focusing on what they have to do, which is learning design and learner experience. And then over a period of time, that will become, core and business as usual. And the focus on work and lifelong learning will start. I think it's just a priority right now. If we ask, or when we ask these questions again in 12 or 18 months' time, I think we'll see a different set of priorities, because learning design and learner experience will be sorted out or semi-sorted out, and the focus will move. I do think that the work and lifelong learning area is critical and not disconnected from the demand and discovery area, which includes program strategy. What type of programs will we deliver? Will they be long form? Will they be short courses? Will there be micro-credentials? What is the market looking for? Because these things are in a loop and very, very important to each other. And I do think that one of the biggest reshaping we will see over the course of the next 5 years or so in higher education is that closer integration between ongoing learning and higher education. The boundaries are not so hard anymore. And we already do see universities, a huge uptick in the partnerships between universities and boot camps, for example, and their short courses in technology areas. And so I think we're going to see much more integration of these different parts of the sector. And hence, work and lifelong learning doesn't necessarily fit at the end of the life cycle, but actually even in the program and course design part of it.
That's a great approach. We're working on that based on credentials for undergraduate and graduate students, and they're also going to be available for other students. We're running out of time because I have a lot of questions, but just one final question if possible. You mentioned that in a year from now, priorities are going to be different. Maybe we should have a conversation in a year from now, but what I wanted to ask you is, what would you say for Chile and Latin America? Here in Chile, here at Universidad del Desarrollo, we are trying to promote a dynamic university and higher education system, that it's changing, trying to generate innovation. What would you say for Chile and Latin America in order to look for the future?
I would say one of the most important things, if you're in a position to collaborate on innovation and collaborate on future models, I think one of the most important things in order to leapfrog what could be a painful process for many universities around the world or higher education around the world is to start right now working with companies and employers. And so higher education and workforce, human resources departments, the recruitment industry, to work so closely together, because that actually is going to be the future. And so if you can build some integrated working together right now to build the future together, rather than see these as separate sequential things, I think you'll be far ahead of the game.
Maria, you know that this event, Educrear, is organized based on 3 days, one for schools, one for higher education, and one for the relationship between universities and corporations and the workforce. So we're in the same page. I wanted to thank Maria Spies, co-founder and co-CEO of Holon IQ, for sharing this session with us. We really appreciate your time, your ideas, and what your company has been doing and will do for the future. Thank you very much.